Crazy Annie, Weird John, Warpo Harpo, Spooky Jukey. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by, returning after my, brief hiatus, my winter break, kind of break from movie reviews, taking a couple months off just during the worst time of the winter here in Minnesota, just to basically, hibernate or, just survive the snow and the cold, if you will. Returning here in March 2020, very excited to be back for another basically year of movie reviews, Blu-ray reviews, just anything and everything movie related or whatever comes to mind through the course of the year. Basically, I'm coming at you to start this year's, season, if you will, or this year's reviews with a very, very, very exciting release that I guess came out about a year ago now in early 2019. I didn't find out about it until just, I think, mid or late December of 2019. But it's a release that is just very, very, very exciting for me because this movie, it's been a part of my life since I was basically 14, and I'll tell you the story before I get on to the review. I'm coming at you to do one of my famed movie/Blu-ray reviews of Screams of a Winter Night. In the shadow of evil, in the echo of sins, in the icy stare of moonlight, our ghostly tale begins. It was a dark and stormy night when the kids arrived at the lake. Screams of a Winter Night has been a movie that I've been aware of since I was 14, and then since I've seen it when I was like, I don't know, how old was I? 21, I think, when I first saw it, or 22. I'm very excited to basically say that Code Red early last year put this out on a beautiful, beautiful Blu-ray release, which I'll talk about after I review the movie. This is just such an important release, in my opinion, for a movie that I think is, obviously it's completely and totally probably not very well known, but I think it's so much, I don't know, something about it, I just love it. It's grown on me over the years, and it's just so much better than so many movies that, probably have a lot bigger cult followings and stuff like that. My history with Screams of a Winter Night goes all the way back to when I was 14, and I, probably at a Mr. Movies, frequented Mr. Movies that I frequented, I saw this cover, and I don't know if it was a horror section or previously viewed bin or something like that on a VHS. I saw this cover, and I'll just show a picture here of the cover that I saw. It was really kind of a cool picture. It was basically like this, except for I think what they did with the cover is for video or something. They put kind of abominable snowman or scary looking, creature looking drawing in this basically artwork, which is the theatrical poster. But I just remember really liking that title, Screams of a Winter Night, and I think the font was all like snowy and icy, and that really cool kind of a drawing of the abominable snowman or a Bigfoot in a winter night, in a winter night scene was just so cool to me. I kind of want to say it was a VHS that was in a previously viewed bin. I don't know why I didn't just buy it. I don't know why I didn't rent it or buy it, if whatever the case may be. If I thought that title and the cover and stuff just looked so cool to me at the time, I don't know why I didn't rent it, but alas, I didn't rent it. What ended up happening is in that same year when I was 14, a buddy of mine, I really, really liked the title, and we were making horror shorts and stuff, and we basically, I think in December that year when we were 14, I basically said, well, let's do a horror short based on this title because this title is so cool. So we did this horror short kind of based on, it was just a horror short with basically, I don't know if it's 5 minutes long or something like that. And it was, at the time I saw Fred Olen Ray's Scalps recently, and it was very much a Scalps inspired 5-minute short where I think it's got like 3 or 4 decapitations in the 5-minute short, and it's just a bunch of nonsense, but it's really cool for a couple 14-year-olds. This little short we did, which I ripped off this title and we titled it, I titled it Screams of a Winter Night, just basically a horror short just with 3 or 4 decapitations in it.
No!
And, you know, as a result, the title kind of just stayed with me over the years until 1998, I think, when I was 21. The same buddy of mine was really kind of cool and kismet, if you will. Well, the same buddy of mine would get me this for my birthday. This is so cool. And I'd never seen it, of course, up until this point. Screams of Winter Night VHS from VCI, Video Communications Incorporated, home video. I don't know what he paid for it, but this is just like probably, this might be, you know, one of the best gifts I've ever gotten in my life, at least from someone who wasn't a family member. Probably the best gift I've ever gotten from someone who wasn't, you know, a family member.
One's already, so you got this at the place you said it maybe?
Yeah.
Alright.
What's that?
Screams of Winter Night.
Mmm.
What do you mean? I said it's a good
It's our first release. Okay, great.
Yeah.
The Screams of Winter Night VHS, and ironically, obviously I saw it at the time, and ironically, I don't think, being 21, I wasn't, as open to things as I am now. I don't think I thought particularly a whole hell of a lot of it at the time, which is really interesting. And I've actually got audio of me and my dad and the buddy who gave me this. He wouldn't see it until a year later. We watched some of it, and it's kind of, I don't know, I mean, I can understand why I thought what I thought about it, but it's kind of disheartening in a way, listening to us just laugh and kind of trash on the movie a year later when we were 22. But at the same time, when you're 22, a movie like this that's rated PG from the late 70s, you're kind of like laughing at the music and laughing at the fact that it's PG and we're not seeing any, tits, or we're not seeing any blood, or we're not seeing any gore, or, But over the years, it's really, really, really become a movie that, as time goes on, and of course as, we entered the 2000s and stuff, and movies, that they were making and putting out in the theater and stuff just continued, in my opinion, to just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Movies like this, in my opinion, that exist, were made back in the late 70s, or so many that were made in the early 80s and stuff. They just get, in my opinion, as the years go on and movies, that are being made and come out in the theater every year get worse and worse. These movies just get better and better, in my opinion. And now, with this really pristine freaking, new Blu-ray presentation, it's just such a monumentous event and a time to be a fan of these kind of movies, to be able to experience this movie finally. And not only a presentation that's amazing, but a long thought, lost version, which like adds almost 30 minutes to the movie, which I was completely unaware of. Usually, when you have a experience like this on Blu-ray or whatever, where a movie like this is an old movie is put out on video, it's just the version you've always known about. But this version's so much more cool because it's not only just a pristine, well, I wouldn't say pristine, but compared to what we have on the VHS and stuff, a very, very huge, picture upgrade. But not only that, but we're getting like nearly 30 minutes of additional footage that we'd never, ever seen before. I know you guys would probably want me to talk about the movie, which I'll do in a couple seconds. But as you guys know, from reviews past and years past and stuff, if I really like a movie, I just get so excited and passionate about a movie, and I just go on and on and on and on and on. Basically, this movie is about, and it's very interesting because it came out like a year in '78, a year before they started making Evil Dead. And it makes you wonder if Sam Raimi and company saw it or something like that, because it's a very similar premise where, kids go out to a cabin and stuff. What I do want to say before I get into the premise of the movie is the opening credits. We just laughed at them, of course, and when I was 21 and 22. But the opening credits as the years go on are kind of cool. It's just white on black credits, but it's like this radio show. It's just audio. It's white on black credits. It's mostly a black screen, and every now and then a white credit will pop up. But it's almost like this really, really brief audio radio show of something going on. And being a low-budget movie, it's much easier, obviously, to just do kind of, this story, which we'll end up finding more about in the movie, of course, as the movie goes on. But what we're hearing in the beginning of the movie is audio of what actually happened at this location that they end up going to, as a character will, tell another character, whatever. And what's really cool about hearing it only and not seeing it is because when the character of John tells Cal this story later on, it's kind of like you don't know if John's just making this up or if this is something that really happened. And what's really cool about not seeing this happen at the beginning and just hearing it is like you don't know necessarily, I don't know if they intended this, but whether they intended this or not, by not seeing this happen and only hearing it at the beginning, that way it's kind of like, well, you don't know if what John was saying was true or if it wasn't, or it's actually a lot more scary to just hear this kind of chaos and this high, you know, these high winds and all this stuff, and like a howling animal that sounds like a monster, and high winds, and you know, this family being terrorized at night, and it's like you hear like, oh, you know, and the kids and, you know, parents or whoever. What's so great about just hearing it is you don't really know how many people are involved, what's going on. You just get a basic gist of it, and it's really kind of creepy to hear this audio of what's presumably going on with the Durans at the time, at Lake Durand or whatever. And I think this is the same place, of course, where these kids end up going out to spend a weekend or a week, or I don't know how long they're going to go to spend in John's cabin or whatever. But I just wanted, before I say talk about the rest of the movie and what it does, I just didn't want to forget to mention that how cool the opening credits is. And just hearing it at the time when I was 21 and 22, I was like, it's so stupid they can't even afford to shoot and of course that's probably the reason they did it that way, but it, you know, either way, even if it was the reason, even if the budgetary reasons were the reasons that they only did the audio, I think at the end of the day, and it makes it even cooler, and that's one of the perfect examples of how a limited budget can actually improve things, in my opinion. So after that, then we're introduced to this van load of characters. I don't know if it's like might be like four couples or something like that, very much like with Evil Dead, are driving up to this main character is John, by the name of John. Incidentally, I love this guy who plays this guy. He must have been like this in real life, because he seems, the character he plays in this movie it just seems like it goes along with the way this guy looks. It just seems like he's playing, and who knows, maybe he was. It just seems like he's playing himself, this John character who's kind of a geek, and he likes to play pranks and tell stories and all this kind of stuff. And basically just the movie starts with them stopping at a gas station, last stop if you will, before they get to the cabin location. I don't know, fill up the water can and do whatever and this and that, or get food and beer. How much beer do you drink? Lots of it. Get a lot, and they're just picking up supplies at this old, kind of country grocery store / gas station or whatever. And of course we're introduced to a bunch of, seedy, shady looking characters, including this fat guy who can't button his jacket all the way, and all these characters which are supposed to, we introduce, the van load of kids, and also the fact that where they're going is kind of like, oh my gosh, very, I don't know, worrisome, or out in the sticks, and who the hell knows where the hell they're going. And the John character asks the gas pump guy, he's like, how close are we to Lake Durand? And of course the kid's like, Lake Durand? I don't, no one's been up there for a long time or whatever. And it's kind of like this thing of like, hey, I don't know if you guys have heard the stories about, and John is kind of like, yeah, we've heard them. Because he maybe doesn't want the guy to tell, and for the people in the van to hear or whatever. But basically, I'm not going to do a beat by beat. I really will promise not to. Basically, that's the premise of this movie. They go out to this cabin, and incidentally, the cabin location is really cool. One thing I do want to mention, being obviously having been born and grown up and living in Minnesota, one of the things that was disappointing to me at the time when I first saw it is, this movie is filmed in Louisiana, so Louisiana is going to have a very, very much different kind of a winter than, a Minnesotan like myself is used to. So it's kind of like these characters are all, bundled up in jackets and gloves and hats and like blowing into their hands and stuff, and it's like, in the meantime, you don't see any any of their breath. You don't see any snow on the ground, and the water at the Lake Durand or whatever is like completely, it's not even frozen. So it's just like, yeah, must be so cold. It's probably like down to 40 degrees. You guys must be suffering. And it's just like, as a Minnesotan watching this movie, it's just like, yeah, screams of a winter night, and there's like no snow on the ground. It doesn't quite cut it. That would be one of my only complaints about the movie, still, even now to this day, is that, well, yeah, it's like, at least they didn't shoot it in California. I mean, it does at least have a kind of a, I guess, a cold, somehow they, do manage to, have a kind of a relatively cold look, and the wind with the wind sounds helps, and the people faking like, you know, patting themselves and blowing in their hands and all this kind of stuff. But that's my biggest, you know, gripe about the movie, is that, you know, obviously if you're from the Midwest or the East or whatever, you know, the northern part of North America and stuff, like the winter that's portrayed in this movie is none too wintry or impressive. So basically, it's really kind of hard to review this movie because you know, I grew up, or not grew up, but grew older, I guess I should say, with the theatrical version on the this VCI VHS tape. And it's kind of weird now because now there's basically an extended version that adds almost 30 minutes to it. So it's kind of like, it's hard to review it because I'm so much more used to the theatrical, and now there's an extended version. But I mean, I guess it's basically the same thing. So as I said, once they get to the cabin and finally get into it, like they're going to go gather wood and do this, they kind of split up. Well, in the extended version, they split up into, you know, groups, and one couple will get water and another couple is supposed to get wood, and John takes Cal over to show him the spot of like the Duran's house, and you know, the Duran's grave. And it's a really kind of cool, and one thing I don't want to forget to mention also is the music in this movie is really kind of cool and low key. And I gotta tell you, for a PG movie, like a PG horror movie, it's funny how maybe I'm just getting soft and pansy in my older age, but it does kind of creep you out, like when John's telling Cal the story and he's just like, you hear the wind and then this music. I wouldn't really call it music, it's just like a tone, like is in the background, like or whatever, and it's just kind of like, it's like there's the Duran's place, and that's the Duran's, and you see like the old, you know, it's just probably a real remains of some old house and like gravestones or whatever. And so the brief story about that John tells Cal about the Duran's, and you know, Lake Durand and the Duran's and all the Durand, you know, legend and lore and all this stuff, is that there's like there's this legend about this area, and this, you know, coyote wind, and this thing that only you know, this entity or whatever that only comes out or is at the height of its power or something during the winter or something like that. And the Duran's were, the cool thing about it is, even as John is telling the story, it's like the character himself isn't really sure about particulars and details, which just makes it kind of even better, because as a viewer you kind of fill in bits and pieces yourself, or the ambiguity of his story, it kind of makes it even more creepy, because it's like, well, when you see this ramshackle old house and these headstones and stuff, it's like, what really happened? And I don't know, the way the first part of this movie, when John's telling Cal the story goes, it's just really kind of cool. And he's like, I don't know, that, you know, some of the family members were found ripped to pieces, and it looks like the fireplace exploded, and just all these really kind of just details that really don't even really necessarily go together. So based on the audio you heard at the beginning, opening credits, you're kind of like, well, is this a monster? Is this an evil entity? Is it both? Just the ambiguity of it is really, you know, combined with the windy sounds and the music and stuff. But that scene is actually really kind of, call me pansy in my, you know, aging age or whatever, but that scene's really just kind of cool. And I guess since this version of the Blu-ray that I'm reviewing does feature, and we now have access as fans to the extended, you know, originally intended version, nearly 2-hour version, I guess I might as well basically review that. So, you know, do my review as reviewing that. So also during this scene when John's telling the story to Cal, there's other scenes where this guy, this other guy who's Steve, is clearly going out with this other girl. But then we get, the thing that's different about the theatrical versus this extended version is, in a way, I would almost agree with the theatrical version. As a fan, it's great to be able to see the nearly 2-hour version. But as a fan, I really think the distributor, probably like Dimension Pictures or Full Moon, or, you know, it's funny how, you know, this is like in the theatrical version, Full Moon Pictures or whatever, and Dimension. I don't know if it's the same Dimension that would go on to be the Dimension, I don't know. But the distributor, I would imagine, are the ones who cut this down from a nearly 2-hour movie to like a 91-minute movie, and they did it really well. And I pretty much agree with, it's kind of like the cut down version of Blood Hook that I reviewed last year. it's almost too much information, and I really think that whoever, the distributor or whatever that cut it down did a really great job at really slicing away all the little bits and pieces that were not necessary. And in some of those things that were cut and that are featured in the extended version on the Blu-ray is, like this Steve character. He's like clearly with this one woman, but then he's like cheating, kissing on this other woman as they're supposed to be gathering wood and stuff. And there's several moments of like a lot of the extra bits in the movie, that the nearly 30 extra minutes of footage in the movie are stuff like that, character details. And there's also it kind of, I don't know, this is why I kind of agree with the theatrical cut, because a lot of the stuff that's cut out is like strife and infighting and stuff between some of the characters. A lot of the characters, like, you can tell like some of them didn't really like each other very much, but it's accentuated even more in the extended version. And it's almost kind of like, I don't know, I don't know which version's better, to be honest. It's really cool to have like two versions, and they're both actually featured on the Blu-ray, which makes this Blu-ray such a must-own. But it's really weird. It was both really, I mean, it was just, let's face it, it was awesome to see this extended version. But anyway, maybe I'll talk more about that when I actually review the Blu-ray. But so the premise of this movie is they go out there, John tells this ghost story about the location that they're at, and that this location's past and stuff, and that it may or may not be a dangerous place. And then they basically proceed to go inside, get some wood and start a fire and drink some beer, just basically the whole movie more or less. I was kind of disappointed about this when I first saw it, which I like now. I actually like now. The whole movie basically is them at the cabin basically telling stories. And in the theatrical version, the version I didn't grow up with, but I grew old with, or I aged with, or whatever you want to say. The theatrical version has 3 stories, and that's usually what happens when you have a movie with, that has several stories. Is usually it's 3, and the actual distributor, I would imagine, when they distributed it theatrically, cut out, there's actually 4 stories, which is really crazy. So the way that they cut out, nearly 30 minutes of footage was they cut out the complete, there's a 4th story, which is actually the 3rd one in this extended version. They cut out the 3rd story, and then all kinds of little bits and pieces. And most of the deleted footage is just little bits and pieces here and there of just character stuff, like Steve cheating with this one other woman. What the hell's her name? Liz. I think her name's Liz. So like, Steve going off, kissing on Liz, and just like I say, just infighting and strife between some of the characters and stuff like that. But it just, after being a fan of this movie for like 21 years or 22 years, it's just so freaking wild to see the extended version and to see nearly 30 minutes more of footage of these characters and stuff. It's just like, oh my God, it's just like a fan of this movie's dream come absolutely true. It's so cool. I'm not going to talk about, since this review is probably going to be way too long anyway, I'm not going to really comment too much on the stories. The first story is this kind of urban legend that we all know about, where the car breaks down and the guy goes to get gas and the woman's in the car, or the girl's in the car on prom night or something like that, and the guy ends up being hung on top of the car, and his feet are scratching on the car thing. And that I would call that probably maybe not the least, I don't know, that's one of my least. It's funny that I like the fact that they tell stories, but at the same time I'm not necessarily a fan of the stories they tell. It's kind of weird. Like, when I watch the movie, I like the main characters so much. I kind of wish they didn't cut away for 4 stories, but at the same time, since the stories we're seeing are actually acted out by the actors in the movie, it's kind of like you are still hanging out with the characters, even though they're different characters, but it's the same actors playing these different parts in these stories. And it makes you wonder why they had the same people play the parts in the different characters and the parts in the story. It's really a unique movie, I gotta tell you that. But the second story is probably my favorite, The Green Light, where it's three, what do you call it, the people in college when you're 3 pledges doing this initiation thing, where they're told to spend the night in this old abandoned hotel or whatever. And that scene is probably my favorite story out of the 4, and it's really atmospheric and moody and creepy, and the outcome is really kind of cool. And that I don't know if that story, I don't know if the rest of these stories were made up for the movie or kind of, you know, ripped off urban legends like the first one or not. But that story is really cool, and the third story is the one that is exclusive to the Blu-ray and, you know, never before seen, which is one that is kind of cool and atmospheric. And incidentally, it's funny how when the distributor cut out the third story, they're actually cutting out the only story that actually kind of showed something, because in the, you know, the first story with the Moss Point Man, like, you barely see the character that's you know, that hung the guy on the car or whatever, and the green light, you don't see any kind of an antagonist character, and because it's just like a green light or whatever. So the third one that was ironically cut from the theatrical version and never seen really until now is the only one of the 4 stories that has like a, you know, kind of a goofy looking creature or a scary looking something, where it's just like this ghost that's kind of just pulled on like a, you know, frickin', I don't know, a clothesline sideways, woo, with like glowing eyes and stuff. And I will say that, you know, maybe it's better off that, you know, the other stories that are supernatural-ish or, you know, have a creature in it or something like that, maybe it's better off that we didn't see anything after all, because I'm not too sure, you know, as cool as that thing is, you know, being pulled through the shot or, you know, floating around or whatever every now and then, it is kind of like maybe it's a little unimpressive at the same time. I gotta tell you, after like being a fan of this movie for like 21, 22 years, it was just so wild to see, you know, the third story or the fourth story, you know, the story that none of us have ever been able to see before, and it actually features the guy who plays Cal and that one boyfriend of that rich, you know, bitch chick. And Cal, the guy who plays Cal doesn't have a beard, you know, as Cal, he's got a beard, so it was really cool that he shaved a beard for that scene, and it's just like, oh my god. And the chick that I think is the cutest girl out of the whole bunch, that Lori, I think her name is, she actually gets to tell this story, which is really cool, because her character is kind of doesn't really get in the theatrical version much to really say or do necessarily. So it was really cool that she got to tell this story. And then the fourth one, of course, which is, you know, if you've seen the theatrical version, is the third story in the theatrical version, the Crazy Annie or whatever you want to call it. But it's like the only one that's really not supernatural or with monsters or whatever. So the third story, you know, of the original thing is, I don't know if I mentioned it, is just these guys. I don't know why these guys are spending the night in the cemetery. I don't know if they're looking for something. I don't know. I just watched the third story last night, and I can't even remember what. So basically, the characters in, you know, in the third story, the fourth one, the new one that we get to see on the Blu-ray, is just, you know, it's all like day for night. It's supposed to be night in the cemetery, and these two characters, I think they're looking for something, and they end up being accosted by this spooky clothesline ghost thing that floats around. I will say the one guy, you know, the Cal guy who plays Cal in this story, doesn't have a beard. He, like, I don't know, he falls into a grave, and I don't know if something happens to him, but the way the other guy dies at the end of in the way it closes out the story is really cool. He's running for the gate, and the gate has these, you know, pointed, just like the Halloween 2018, it's got these pointed spikes on the top, and he's like running for the gate, and it's slow motion, and this ghost goes like through the shot, and the guy's like propelled up, and like we don't see it, of course, because it's PG and it's the movie Screams of Winter Night, but we end up revealing that the character, you know, through panning down to the gate and stuff, we see him slumped over the gate with the spikes coming out of him. And you know, that's really cool, and it's just so great to have this freaking, you know, that scene back and stuff like that. And as I was saying about the fourth one, the fourth story, which is the third in the theatrical version, it's the only one that's like not supernatural, and it's just about this character who was like abused, who's just a quiet girl who was like abused on a first date or something like that. And I don't know if she was crazy before then, probably, but you know, she kills this guy and said this, that was trying to like rape her, and said the story that they were attacked, and she got away with it. And later on, she's off at college and has this, you know, fight with this roommate and ends up killing her. I mean, that story is really not my favorite. Actually, ones are probably the green light, and actually maybe the cemetery one. Actually, I don't know. I like the guy who plays John so much, and that character is in the green light as well. And the guy who plays Steve, and also the guy who plays Harper. That guy, for some reason, the Harper guy got 2 of the 4 stories. He got to be in 2 of them, and I think all the other characters. Oh no, Steve got to be in 2 of them too. But I guess that's because they're like the 2 main lead guys or whatever. But so what's really cool about this movie is they go to this cabin, tell 4 stories, and then throughout the course of the movie, you know, then I think after the 3rd story in the extended version, they play the, you know, John and Steve play the prank on all the rest of them where they, you know, they dress up as a wolf man or whatever and scare them. And then I think, you know, that prissy rich bitch tells the 4th story about the crazy Annie. And then what proceeds to happen after that is like this story that John told Cal about Coyote Wind and what happened to the Durans and stuff. This is the end of the movie for me, is like probably, I don't know, the best part of the movie, in the sense that it actually, for being PG and for really not seeing anything or whatever, it does manage to actually be relatively creepy and really, really effective for now being like a 42-year-old movie. It's just like, wow, you know, basically what happens to the Durans, we now get to see, and that's another reason that it's cool not to see what happened to the Durans, because the same thing will end up happening to these guys at the cabin. And if we saw what happened to the Durans, then seeing it happen to these guys would just be very redundant. So that's just so cool. I don't know if that was intended by the filmmakers, but it's just so cool, you know, the way they did that. So it's basically nothing really to write home about, but I just, you know, being a fan of this movie and fan of late 70s movies in general, I just, as the years go on, like, what basically happens is, like, 2 of the couples run, you know, it's getting really windy and they hear the howling and all this stuff, just like towards the beginning of the movie with the radio program audio. And it's like characters are getting all, you know, they're hearing, you know, howls and roars from all over different places outside the cabin. The wind's just really blowing. And 2 of the couples actually run out of the cabin, and the rest of the, you know, so it's like, is it half of them run out, and then the other, is it the other 4, I think, maybe, are in the cabin, and, you know, stuff, you know, one runs towards the window and it blows open, and, you know, all this glass goes in her face and kills her that way, and this thing, you know, falls off. I can't remember how Steve dies, because didn't he stay in the, or yeah, like, I don't know how many, it seems like, I don't know how many kids are, so 4 run out, and I don't know how many are, it seems like maybe 5 are left in the cabin, I don't remember, but it's just really kind of cool. I mean, I'm probably building it up way too much or whatever, but I just really love how the movie ends, where they basically go to the scary place. John tells Cal a story about this location's past, tell 4 stories, and then basically at the end of the movie, what John tells Cal happened to the Durans happens to them. And basically, I think from what I can understand as a viewer, like, all of them die, even the 4 that run away, the way they kind of do that freeze frame and have that roar, scary roar animal sound, I think means that they're all going to be eaten and torn to pieces or whatever by the monster or whatever the hell it is. That's one thing I kind of like about it too, just being like the Coyote Wind and all this ambiguity revolving around what happened to the Durans. It's kind of like you don't really know if it's a, you know, I guess as a viewer, I basically, you know, take it to mean it's like a, you know, supernatural / monster or whatever. But it's kind of cool being I've been saying that word. You know that word, ambiguous. There you go. I can do it. So, Screams of a Winter Night, I would give, gosh, I don't know, 3 stars for sure. 3 stars for sure, maybe even 3 1/4 star, maybe even 3.5 stars. The thing I love about this movie is the atmosphere, the characters. I just love John and Steve, like the characters of those 2, and Cal is like, John and Steve are kind of like the pranksters and the jerks or whatever. Cal is just the nice guy that, you know, every girl would like to be with, and then you've got the rich bitch and, you know, her kind of servant boyfriend or whatever. So I love the characters, I love the atmosphere, I love the music, the ambience. It's just one of those classic late 70s, you know, low budget movies that, in my opinion, so many times is the case, it turns out to be better than anything the big studios are throwing out. I just love these quaint, low budget independent movies, and the acting is really, for as low budget as this movie is, and it's shot on 16mm just like Evil Dead would end up being, the acting, I think, is really pretty great. And like I say, these characters, you feel like they're just playing themselves, you know, they're kind of just, the actors. You know, they're just playing themselves, and it's just, what can I say? That'll probably be it. Let me just go for it and give Screams of Winter Night 3.5 stars out of 4 stars. It's really a movie that, you know, me and my buddy were laughed at, you know, when we were 22 or whatever. But, you know, now being like, I don't know what, 21 years later, it's a movie that I find, you know, I really, especially in this new Blu-ray edition and extended and new transfer and everything, it's a movie that I really enjoy these days. And now on to my review of the Code Red Blu-ray that came out early 2019 from what I understand, and like I said, I didn't realize it was out until like December of 2019. But this is, if you're a fan of this movie or a fan of old late 70s horror movies, and if you're okay with the fact that, you know, it's PG and you basically don't see anything, this movie might be right up your alley. But that's the you've probably already seen it, but that's the cover that was on the VHS that I saw in Mr. Movies when I was 14, you know, with that scary looking drawing and the frozen, snowy, icy kind of, you know, lettering and font and stuff like that. As you can see, it's this painting, but with that spooky thing added. No, the moon was there. They just added the spooky creature or whatever. But as always, I'll show you the back and show you the special features. What we got is a brand new 2K scan of the original 16mm A B-roll camera negative of the never before seen uncut, and they're saying 124-minute director's edition with the long lost fourth story included. It's not 124 minutes. I don't know why they say that. What's so funny is they say 124 minutes up here, and then down here they say 125 minutes. In fact, the extended version's 119 minutes long. I don't know why they think it's 124/125 minutes long, so that detail is incorrect. And then you also got original theatrical cut and on-camera interview with star Glil Gazko. Then they're saying trailer. I don't know. Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, so then there's the trailer. It's really cool to see the guy Glil Glasgow played Steve, and it's really cool to have that interview with him on this Blu-ray. It's 21 minutes of him just recounting his, you know, early days and, you know, being a aspiring actor and his experience on Screams of Winter Night and stuff. I would have really loved to hear from Matt Borrell, which of course is the guy who played John, but unfortunately all we, you know, do is get to hear from, you know, Glil Glasgow is probably my second choice if we could have an interview with him. So I'm glad we have an interview with him. The special features are basically just that, the on-camera interview with him. But, you know, the main thing about this release that you get it for is just obviously the fact of having it on freaking Blu-ray finally. This is a title that I don't think ever received an official DVD release. So like I said, in so many of my reviews of, you know, movies like Berserker and stuff, that, you know, it's really cool to have these titles that completely, they go from VHS, skipping DVD. Of course, it would have been great to have had it on DVD, but it's even cooler when they go from VHS to be able to see it on Blu-ray. It's just like, because the difference in image quality is just so crazy, you know, different, that it's just like, whoa, mama, that's amazing. The image quality on this Blu-ray, I'm talking, of course, about the extended version is absolutely amazing. And it's not, you know, because it's like an old, you know, frickin', you know, at the time it's like a 40 or 41-year-old you know, 16mm print or whatever. It's not perfect. There's instances, and they make up a small percentage of the overall experience. And again, I'm talking first about the extended version, the 119-minute version here. There's very few instances where, but it does happen, where the color, you know, as the film is, you know, progressing, like, you know, there'll be segments of the movie where the color is all screwed up and there's like all kinds of crap on the screen, just like faded frames or whatever on the screen. And as so many times often is the case with 16mm movies and stuff like Texas Chainsaw, like, the movie, I think pretty much throughout the whole thing is kind of rough in the sense that, not image print wise, but it's, you know, kind of like it's got the jitters, like every now and then it'll just, I don't know if it's primarily, I don't think it's even necessarily on cuts only, But I think, it'd just be a random thing where it'll happen when the movie's playing, and it'd just be like I don't know how to describe it, where it's just like, jitter or some kind of anomaly in the image or whatever. But stuff like that doesn't bother me. I've said, you guys know if you've seen my reviews that I've said so many times that things like that, artifacts, film anomalies, stuff like that, I don't really have a problem with, especially with these older movies, because it just kind of adds to that midnight screening. Not that you can really see barely any frickin' 35 or film projections in theaters much anymore these days. But if you are, or if you did do that back in the day or whatever in the 90s or early 2000s and stuff, it reminds you of that kind of stuff. So it's not a perfect perfect image in that aspect, but it's, don't get me wrong, the majority of the movie looks absolutely amazing, and those glitches or whatever you want to call them, little bits and pieces where they do that, I don't know, I guess if you're bugged by stuff like that, that might be a problem for you in this Blu-ray release, but you can't let yourself be bugged by stuff like that. You got to just enjoy how amazing this movie looks. It's just like, oh my gosh. One thing I do want to talk about in regards to the sound is like when it starts, I don't know, the sound might be, it starts like the sound might be a little quiet when it starts, like the music and stuff really doesn't have much of an impact at all when it starts at all. So, but I think it's almost like, I don't know, it seems like the sound gets better as the movie progresses, so who the hell knows what's going on with that. But as I watched the movie, the extended version, the 119-minute version, I don't think there's any instances where there's any like missing film, which is a big problem with an older movie like this. I don't think there's any of that in the extended version, the 119-minute version. You've got some of that in real changes of the theatrical version. So I think I'll just get on to a brief review of the theatrical version on this Blu-ray. I've seen in forums and stuff someone mentioned that it's not HD. It may or may not be the case. It looks, for the most part, if you're sitting far away, far away enough from the TV like you should be. It looks, a lot of times it looks like it could be HD. I don't know if it is or not. But I was kind of thinking they were just gonna be sloppy and put like the VHS, like the VCI VHS, tape version for the theatrical. No, it's like they got a 35mm print or something for the theatrical version. So it's like a new transfer. It's the aspect ratio, whatever it is, 1:7:8. So it's like it's just an included. It's like that Blu-ray, that code, or what was it, that 88 Films Blu-ray I reviewed of Just Before Dawn. I think Code Red has a version that's probably just the same transfers, but it's really cool. They did the same thing where they've got like the theatrical in that. It's really ironic because in that version the theatrical, I think, was the better looking one, and then the extended or international or whatever they called it was the not as good looking one, where it's reversed in this one. The extended looks the best, and the theatrical one it doesn't look as good. Like the colors and the contrast and stuff like that, and the brightness and stuff are so much more balanced and look so much better on the extended version. And the theatrical version of this, like, there's so many scenes where it's like really just like washed out color, washed out, like way overly bright. It's like almost a scene by scene or shot by shot basis, where some shots are like way too bright. But again, and real changes are possibly missing a little bit of footage and stuff. But again, that kind of adds to that midnight screening, celluloid midnight screening feel. It's just, I said it when I reviewed the Blu-ray of Just Before Dawn, the 88 Films one that I got a couple years ago now, that it's so, I love releases like this so much, where they've got two different versions of the movie, and they actually give you two different prints from two different film elements. Like I said, I expected them to just put the VHS version of theatrical on here, to be honest. I was shocked in a good way when I saw this, and I was like, oh my god, they must have got a theatrical, a 35mm print for the theatrical version. To be able to have two different versions from two different film sources of the same movie on one Blu-ray, it's just like, for the ultimate collector, the ultimate film, film buff, geek, nerd guy, that's just like so amazing. I cannot praise this release enough. Yeah, it could have more special features. It would be nice if you could have interviews or commentary with the writers, producer, directors, guys, or whatever, more actors that participated in it. But the most important thing for me, as I've said with reviews like this, for me is just the image or the way the movie's presented. And for me, that's the most important thing with a release like this, is how good it does the movie look and sound. And to be able to have, as I said, this is not often the case where you've got a release like this, like, you know, 42 years later, that you actually get like nearly 30 minutes of restored footage never before seen. Not only that, but unlike so many versions where it's cut, like Slumber Party Massacre 3, and the film elements are no longer available. I mean, this version, I mean, not only is the footage that we never ever saw back, but it's back in the pristine quality that is just as good as the rest of the movie. It's just, I can't stress how amazing this Blu-ray is, and if you're a fan of the movie, you've got to get it. And if you've never heard of the movie or never seen it, I think you can see it. Oh, that's one thing I didn't mention. I think you could see it was on YouTube. I mean, the extended version, because when I heard about it, I'm like, well, let me just see if it's on YouTube in some kind. So put up, you know, I don't know if it's still up now, but I was able to actually see the extended version, and that was, you know, helped me make my decision whether or not to get the Blu-ray or not. Definitely recommended movie, and highly recommended Blu-ray. And in closing, yes, I got this on eBay. I don't know when, you know, maybe, I don't know when. At some point, the original theatrical poster for Screams of a Winter Night, and that's really, as a fan of this movie, as a big fan of this movie, it's really cool to own that. And it's presented in the classic 70s, like late 70s, mid to late 70s fashion of having like the, you know, little squares of characters' faces along the bottom of the poster and stuff like that. It's really fun poster. It's got sound by Ryder Sound Services Incorporated, Rinconada Incorporated, 1978, all rights reserved. But as a fan of this movie, it's really fun to have that original theatrical poster. And yeah, as often is the case, I probably went way too long with this review. If you're still watching, if you watched the whole review, thank you very much for doing so. I don't know why, I feel like I have to apologize when a review goes way too long. I mean, you'd think for people, if they like watching my reviews, you think the more review the better or whatever, but you know, I don't know. Feel free to let me know what you think of this movie, if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, if you've heard about it or whatever. Also, let me know if you want to, you know, let me know if you wanted to go check it out on YouTube, and let me know if it's still, you know, the extended version, or the extended version is still on YouTube or whatever. I would imagine you'd be able to see some version, even if they got rid of the extended. I'm sure the theatrical's on YouTube or something like that. But once again, you know, if you love kind of spooky, atmospheric kind of horror movies from the late 70s and don't really care about not seeing any TNA or gore or anything really kind of scary or whatever, and if you just like goofy characters, and it's just, oh my gosh, the atmosphere, this is like just one of the best, you know, it's just, I just love the atmosphere and the characters of this movie. I would highly recommend it for those reasons, and of course highly recommend this Blu-ray. Thank you so much, Code Red, for putting this out. Before I wrap up the review, well, there's not very much to show you inside, but you've got, I love the artwork there they put on the Blu-ray. But thank you so much, Code Red, for putting this out. This is just such a, it's just such an amazing thing to finally have in one's possession, being a huge fan of this movie. Thank you very much for watching this video, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, get away from me. Stop it. No! Hey, get away from him! No! No!
Screams of a Winter Night.
It's a nice night for a walk. God, it's sort of cold and stuff, but oh yeah, I like it. Oh, Jesus. That was something else. God, that was freaky.